The views and opinions of this broadcast do not reflect the views and opinions of Armed Media, New Productions and its affiliates. Enjoy the show.
Good evening and welcome to the Leadership with Biana Kovic show. And thank you for being with us tonight. We hope that our conversations will help you become more effective and reflective when it comes to your own leadership practices and enable you to leave a positive legacy. Our very special guest is Dr. Keis. Dr. Ken holds a PhD in leadership and management and is a global authority on behavioral assessment strategies and processes and expert in leadership, purpose, and wellness. Dr. Ken is president and CEO of Consulting Resource Group International, Inc., which has served thousands of companies, associations, industry groups, and leaders in over 30 countries. Dr. Ken has authored over 4 million words of content, including 500 articles, 4 books, and a dozen assessments. He is a highly sought-after author, speaker, trainer, podcast host, and TV and media guest. Ken, welcome to the show.
Well, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you for joining us. Ken, you're the president and CEO of Consulting Resource Group International, and I was wondering if you can tell us a little bit about your company.
Well, Consulting Resource Group, as we call it, CRG, was founded by Dr. Terry Anderson 40 years ago at the time of this taping. So here we are, that's 4 generations later. And the reason our company was started is Dr. Anderson was frustrated with other psychological tools and assessments like Myers-Briggs or DISC for his psychology courses. So we created our own tool, the Personal Style Indicator. And then from there, people kept asking us for other kinds of assessments. So now we have 10 core assessments that lead into 13 different reports that develop the whole person from values, wellness. We have a leadership skills. We have our personality. We have sales, self-worth or confidence indicator, entrepreneurship. So all of those work together as a congruent system. And then we provide those tools and resources to professional developers and individuals around the world in 12 languages. And I think we're in 30 or 40 countries now. It's sort of lost track.
That's very interesting. So you use assessment for folks to create self-awareness so that they can lead or they can do their job better.
Absolutely. There's a lot of assessments out there or tests that are trying to be something we do to you. Our tools are something we do with you to create and anchor this self-awareness or this consciousness or benchmarking, whatever word you want to use. And then from there, I'm going to start doing self-management, which then leads into self-mastery. Everybody talks about emotional intelligence, social intelligence. Well, that's really what we do for the whole person. So even though you might have leadership skills, if your health and wellness is poor, then you're not going to be able to implement that. Or if your skills are good, but you're not playing to your style strengths, you're not going to have sustainability. So we really want to develop that whole person in that self-awareness, and that's what we do probably as well or better than anybody else on the planet.
So talking about self-management, I think that's a very interesting word because a lot of people don't use it. Can you talk to us a little bit more about it and why is it so important for you to have awareness about self-management?
The majority of us are on autopilot every day. So we just do what we do without even thinking about it. Most of us, if you drove to work today, if you're not sort of a virtual worker, you went to work and probably you don't even remember half of the trip back to work or even the sequence. So self-awareness then leads to this choice of managing self. The reality is we tend to have, unfortunately in our society, more self-centeredness. And self-management is that what I'm going to do is I'm going to be intentional or deliberate with my behaviors, my choices to build relationships and also to influence and connect with other people more effectively. And if I don't manage myself, then I'm just showing up sort of awkwardly, accidentally. And we want to teach you that in any given moment, we have choices about how we respond, how we react, how I implement those skills. And that's the difference between being, highly effective and ineffective.
That's very interesting. I spoke to many folks, and some folks do believe that they do not have freedom to make choices. What do you say to these folks who actually believe that some other people are actually in control of what they do on a daily basis?
If you actually say you don't have freedom to make choices, then you're a victim. The reality is that as soon as we take responsibility for our condition that we're in, then we actually can do something about it. If you don't think you have choices, then you're a victim, so then why even bother living? I mean, I'm being a bit harsh, but the reality is that it's those people that take responsibility. Now, there's a psychological condition that Scott Peck identified 30 years ago in his book, The Road Less Traveled, called character disorder. Character disorder is the most difficult condition to treat. It's a dysfunctional condition, and character disorder is where I blame everybody else for my situation. Well, if I blame everybody else, that means that I have no contribution to the condition that I'm in, which is completely false. So what I say to those individuals is, why are they thinking that way? Why do they think they don't have any choices? That belief system came from somewhere. It is a dysfunctional belief system, but it is a belief system nonetheless. So part of their development is to shift that, to change that, get past that focus that, you know what, you do have choices. And as soon as we blame other people, then we become a victim. Now, we used to have a marriage counseling business. And with that, a lot of times people attack the other person, says, my partner does this, that person does this, or I have, in our coaching side where executives kind of get all riled up over what their people are doing or not doing. The only person that I actually can control, technically, is myself. I can influence other people, but the only person I can do is control myself. Now, there's a study done around the most highly effective individuals. There were 6 habits that were identified. One of the habits was clarity, but another habit was influence. So when you go back to self-management, if I'm going to influence other people who are like me or different than me, then I need to be intentional, awake, and conscious. People are constantly leaving me clues about how they want to be treated, what's important to them, what are their values, all these things, but most people are oblivious to those clues. So as a self-management, what I want to do is be able to manage self and then also manage my interaction with others in an intentional way. I'm not changing who I am, but I'm adjusting my behavior, my skill set, my approach, because I'm going to be the opposite of self-centered. I'm going to be honoring other individuals first. And when I honor them first, then oddly enough, their willingness to adjust for me, their willingness to work with me is going to increase.
What advice do you have for folks who are working in environments that they have to deal with? Because you said the way you behave, you can influence other people's behavior. But for the folks that are actually working with type of folks that are passive aggressive, because I worked in an organization with folks who are just really passive aggressive towards their leaders, what suggestions do you have for those leaders?
Passive-aggressive is a dysfunctional approach where there are some individuals who sabotage process. So part of this is that we have to call people out on it. Passive-aggressive isn't going to get the results that you want. Usually passive-aggressive individuals are frustrated themselves. Because I teach health and wellness, there's a very significant percentage of the global population workforce are stressed. It's over 50% globally, and then some countries it's as high as 80%. So if you're passive-aggressive, you are internalizing that frustration, and that is affecting you. When I hold a grudge or I have unforgiveness towards somebody else, which is part of the root of what you're talking about, then it's kind of like me taking the poison and expecting the other person to die. We don't provide forgiveness to other people for them. We have forgiveness for us because it releases us. All the research around being in an unforgiveness state or a bitterness state actually shortens my life, decreases my health and wellness, increases my illness. All of those are relative to that. So again, the only thing we actually do have are choices, choice how I respond. Now, I'm not saying that what the person did was okay. I'm not saying how they conduct themselves long-term is acceptable. But what I am saying is that how I respond, my emotional triggers are critical. Have you ever heard of Dr. John Gottman?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so John's expertise is around personal relationships. And he did a study and he created a thing called the Love Lab. And in that Love Lab, what he did was really getting couples and partners into a conflict discussion. So they had, EKG, they had blood pressure, they had motion sensors on the chairs, all these kinds of things. And what they did is they established this principle. And this is why this is so important for all of us about managing self, is that once my heartbeat goes over 100 beats per minute, I am no longer rational. So everybody talks about going into the reptilian mind. So once I get over 100 beats per minute, I'm going to say and do things that are not appropriate. Now, Dr. Anderson, who founded the company, and Dr. Mitch Davidi, who is the co-author of the book Deliberate Leadership that we'll get to in a minute, all of their work is in law enforcement. So the question is asked, what is the most dangerous position or situation for law enforcement officers to get into? And the answer to that is domestic disputes. And they say, why is that? Because people are irrational. Here's this VP of this company who is leading all these people, and then they do something silly or crazy. And then recently in Southern California, a couple was sort of beating on each other. The officers separated them, and then the wife got a gun out and shot both of them. And so part of that, and I know that's a pretty demonstrative example, but the reality is that nobody, and this is Dr. David Burns' work out of Feeling Good, is nobody offends you unless you let them. Part of the dynamic now as a leader, as individuals, is that people are so easily offended by somebody else, and then they take you out. Offended individuals are immature and undeveloped, in our opinion. So what David Burns talks about in his book is that nobody offends you unless you let them. Every bit of irritation, every bit of frustration that you are experiencing is self-inflicted. So, man, that's a high level of accountability. That's a high level of responsibility. And that's how we talk about self-awareness. If my irritation, if my offense is all self-inflicted, then guess what? You're in charge to change it. Again, I'm not saying that what they said is appropriate or it's acceptable. It's just that my response, my emotional triggers, I'm in charge of that. So some people practice what I call anger against inanimate objects, and then when they get into people, they can't manage themselves as they interact and have these relationships. That's why conflict resolution doesn't happen very well, is people have created these triggers. So example is, let's say your computer is quitting and it's being very frustrating, so you see these sort of Facebook videos where somebody throws their computer across the room. Well, they're now practicing anger against this computer, which will do nothing based on my anger. So how does anger help? It doesn't. So this ability to stay centered, grounded, everybody talks about mindfulness. Well, mindfulness is a self-management skill. I am choosing at this moment to kind of respond this way. Now, guess what? I teach this, I still fail, but I'm way better than I used to be. And when I know that I am kind of responsible for this condition, the freedom is I can do something about it.
I understand you have to stay centered, but external, it's reality. What if these people are jeopardizing the projects? How do you manage that? How do you manage them or correct them to actually do something about it if they're being passive aggressive?
Well, that's part of, again, calling them out that they're being that way. If you don't have the conversations about being real and reality, if they're being passive-aggressive, then sometimes it's their own lack of development. So they haven't developed their skills. Maybe it's a culture or an environment of fear. And so in the past, when they have spoken up, they have been crapped on, pardon the language. And so as a result of that, they don't feel safe. So we teach this concept of credibility. It's in the book Deliberate Leadership. Credibility has three sort of different levels. First of all is credibility with self. There's some people who actually discount their own worth, their own value. So I say, Ken, thank you for a nice job. And I said, oh, it was nothing. So rather than receiving that compliment, I discount the compliment. Now, every single person that's listening to this show, you have a level of credibility with everybody you work with of high, medium, or low. So this whole idea of credibility is that we're not even sort of aware that people are not cooperating with me. They're not contributing to my success because of my behavior. And then the last one is every organization that you're part of has some kind of credibility in the marketplace, right? So if I say Disneyland or I say Wall Street, you could have a different perspective, whatever that might be. So if people aren't developed, if people aren't called out for their behavior, then they're not going to change. Now, if it's the environment that's really containing them and causing them to be hesitant or sabotaging, then that's part of the responsibility of the leader. Is the environment contributing to it? Are they contributing to it as an undeveloped employee, or both? I remember once years ago, we were working for a Fortune 100 company. I was doing a retreat for all the regional managers, and the president had asked for this event to occur, and it was a leadership development sort of assessment. Nobody in the team would fill out the assessment. And the reason they wouldn't fill out the assessment is that they felt They couldn't trust leadership that the assessment wouldn't be used for punitive measures. So in itself, the response of the team told me what the cultural sort of undertow was for the organization. So we had to work with them, and the reality is that we had to reassure the team that this was a development assessment, it was a development process. We wanted to benchmark things so that we could see the skills that you had or didn't have for the purposes of growing you and making you more effective and everybody enjoying their work more. Instead of, oh, you have a low score? Biana, you're gone. You're toast. Every organization, no matter what the size, has a culture, if you want it or not. So are we paying attention to that as well?
So what was the feedback? Were you able to not only reassure employees, but also help change the culture in that case?
We did to a certain degree. Part of cultural shift and change is long-term. So you need the commitment from the top for that organization to shift. I remember going into Ford, and the vice president had asked me to come in and work with all the regional managers with them. We were doing this half-day workshop for them really around the deliberate leadership. And the only person who didn't participate was the person who hired me to come do it. So it's interesting where he saw that these people needed it, but he felt that he didn't need it himself. Now that shift in the marketplace is happening. This is a few years ago now. But, I'm connected to Marshall Goldsmith, and he is the number one executive coach in the world. And now, if we go from 20 years ago, CEOs, leaders, individuals, they now accept the fact that coaching is a legitimate and very powerful process to help people go to the next level. Here's the reality, is behavioral change is hard. It really, really is hard. I had a coaching failure process occur recently. And what happened was that the individual was not willing to do even minor shifts or changes. So the board said that this CEO needed to have coaching because his interaction with his staff was not positive. He was creating an environment where it was only his way. He wasn't really getting the feedback of other individuals. We started to help him to kind of be aware. I moved into it slowly. We do what we call stakeholder feedback in this situation. So we get the feedback from everybody around. This is how you show up. And then we share that feedback with the leader, and the leader can't argue the feedback. The leader just says, thank you. So I might say, Ken, you know what? You don't really listen to other people. Well, that's not true. I listen. No, Ken, you can't argue this. You have to shut up and just say, thank you. And so you receive that feedback. And what we quickly discovered is that one of the reasons that he wasn't doing well is that he wasn't willing to listen and he wasn't willing to change. So we had to abandon the coaching because for us, integrity is very important. So if we ask you to do something and then you don't do it, then really my time's too valuable to work for somebody who is not willing to make a choice to change. So this goes back to not everybody is willing to make the changes. I'm not saying change is easy, but it is something that is very, very possible.
I want to jump and talk about your book, Deliberate Leadership, and you talk about 2 mistakes that cause leadership to fail. Can you talk to us about it?
Well, 2 reasons that leaders fail is number 1 is a lack of emotional, interpersonal skills. I mean, leaders are leading people. The core of our book is really teaching our leadership style or our personal style assessment and model. And we help people to understand that we have natural preferences. So that's number 1. So they just lack this sort of emotional, social, interpersonal intelligence and skills. Number 2 reason that leaders fail is hubris or arrogance. So we already talked about that, which is, and this is the research from Peter Carrero, is that leaders now says, well, I don't need to develop. So not only are they not really have great people skills, but they don't believe that they need development. I remember working in an organization that had about 50,000 employees, and so our tools are used and integrated within organizations for leadership development, VPs of HR and learning and access as we train the trainer, away we go. So this company got a new VP of HR. And this is not a slight on lawyers, but he was a lawyer who then became the VP of HR. And this was a leadership development program. And what happened was we had examples in there, and then we asked the participants, how does these concepts apply to you back at home with your personal relationships, with your kids, with your siblings, with your friends? The VP of HR says, we can't have this in the program. It's irrelevant. So what are you talking about? Because people take wherever they are. If you can apply this to improve your personal relationships, you are going to bring it back to work and be more effective, because you're going to see the positive impact that those concepts, that teaching, those insights, that awareness is having for you. The suggestion that it doesn't cross over into personal life is ridiculous. And so his arrogance and hubris hindered the organization going to the next level. Now, about a year later, guess what? He was gone. And it was recognized and realized that they really had put an individual who was not skilled in HR. I think what was happening, they were having a lot of sort of litigation that was occurring within the organization. And so a lot of times HR is playing not to lose rather than playing to win. So it's really around administration, around personnel versus the development of the team.
Interesting. I was going to ask you another question about how do you stay humble while leading others, and why is that so important?
It's one of the more difficult skills, and it's critically important. And people equate humility with being weak. It's really not. Confidence and humility can coexist. The difference is the word arrogance is really, I feel I'm better than you. Confidence is that I feel competent in what I'm doing. And interesting enough, in the study that Jim Kouzes did, is that competence is one of the number one factors to have credibility in the workplace as a leader. Because you don't want to work for a really, really, really nice idiot. So humility is really the fact that I'm not boastful about who I am. I don't think that I'm better than you. I see you as a peer. Just because I'm VP, it basically means I have more work and more responsibility. One of the number one leaders was the former CEO of Ford, who was coached by Marshall Goldsmith. He says one of the things that he really appreciated is that a lot of times the VPs were telling the CEO what they wanted. And he said, no, I don't want that. I want to know if it is going badly, I need to know that. Because a lot of times in these corporations, rather than say that it's going badly and I need your help, I will just kind of misrepresent what's going on because that's easier for me. And you can't really know till there's a disaster, and that happens all the time. Is that he really set up a standard. No, you need to say, is it green? Is it yellow? Is it red? What does it mean? If it's red, what help do you need? And so the CEO shut up and really facilitated the conversation, asked the questions, because you should be hopefully hiring experts and individuals who can bring to bear their content, their expertise, their intelligence, and then work together. And really a skilled CEO is about asking, not about telling.
And also listening.
Exactly. So the asking requires the listening, and like you said, really listening, and then clarifying through that listening. It's actually in our leadership skills assessment. We have 5 different categories. There's 60 skills. We researched this over 20 years. This is the core curriculum for one of the new law enforcement online courses that my colleagues have launched. Item number 1 is self-management in 12 different categories. Number 2 is actually interpersonal communication skills. And most don't even know that, and I think it's skill number 20 or something is around listening, but also questioning. Because lots of times what you hear is not actually what the answer is. So a skilled communicator understands that the real answer might be 2, 3, 4, 5 questions deep. Especially it comes around personal matters. I mean, many years ago, I was the number 1 sales rep for an organization, and then my sales suffered severely. Well, the reason is that I had a broken relationship where my fiance ditched me. And so I was wounded, and my sales suffered because of that, not because of my sales skills. So the leader helped to focus on the fact that, Ken is a skilled sales professional, but he is suffering emotionally because of this loss. And so somebody has illness, sickness, separation, a divorce, kids that are going through stuff. That is part of the skill set as a leader to find out what are the reasons or reason that a person performance has gone down. And I'm going through a discovery versus, Ken, you need to work harder. Your sales numbers are down. Get going. Rather than really understanding the source for my reduced performance.
So do you believe that setbacks are connected to emotional challenges that we are going through our lives?
In our personality development factors model, and I'll just sort of really, really quickly go through it, we talk about personality or personal style, and everybody knows about that. So our personal style indicator would be a replacement to DISC or alternative DISC, Myers-Briggs, True Colors, some of those other ones. Biophysical factors can fit into that. I was actually misdiagnosed as manic depressive way back in the 80s and put on lithium, an antidepressant, but I actually was hypoglycemic. There's all kinds of toxins in our environment, and that can be affecting a person's ability to manage emotionally. If you don't get sleep, you can't manage conflict because your body doesn't have the energy to do it. So you might have the skills, you might even have the emotional intelligence, but you don't have the physical energy or emotional energy or constitution at that time because of your condition. Could be self-worth levels, high or low, could be cultural sort of nuances, what we call environmental factors, could be values or social teachers, what you've been taught. So, I'm from Eastern European descent as well. And so what my family expects, what they like versus we have some clients from China or we have individuals from LA or New York, those things are going to be influencing you. And then another one is what we call emotional anchors. So If we have emotional events in life that then create triggers, that can contribute to my emotional intelligence. So when we talked about offended, you could have some situations in life where you have triggers that set you off. So you and I have the same personal style, same assessment results, and some of these other things. But you had an event that happened when you were 12 years old that when that occurs again, that's a trigger for you. And until we process that, then that is going to be this one that contributes to how I respond. And then the last one we have is spirituality. We highly believe that people's belief system highly influences what they do and what they don't do. And if somebody says, I don't believe in anything, I'm just like nothing, well, then that is your belief system. So people can't believe in nothing because nothing is something for a human being. So all of these combine, and this is our proprietary model. We call it Personality Development Factors Model, and it's in the book Deliberate Leadership, where we outline that you have all these factors contributing to my personhood, the whole person, everything that's going on. And all of these moving pieces then are affecting my results, my response, my skill levels.
So what you're saying to us, you got to have a balance.
I would say balance. I'd also say awareness, consciousness. So somebody said, does one dominate more than the other? I said, well, it depends. So if all of these things are developed, but my health is really sucky and I'm going through cancer, it really doesn't matter about the other ones. So the variance by which each one of these is influencing is completely unique, but all of them are. So we want to be aware, conscious, awake, and developing consciousness, self-awareness, self-management, ownership in all of these areas rather than one single thing. And that's why we created an entire assessment system so that people really can develop the whole person and have this congruency between the tools and resources so that we can take and raise the water level so that your effectiveness in your life, your fulfillment in your life goes to a whole new level.
And what is your mission in life?
My purpose is to help others to live, lead, and work in purpose. And then the subtitle of that is to help people to realize the potential in all areas of their life.
And any final thoughts?
Well, when you think about your show is about leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And if anybody needs to take responsibility for their development and to be in a continuous loop or get a coach or do some training or listen to a podcast like you do, that's leaders for sure. And I do have a gift. Is that okay to mention that now?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so I have a new book called The Quest for Purpose. So it's really people that are wanting to learn and get clear about their life. And this is normally $30, but I'm giving it to all the listeners of your great show. Mm-hmm. And they could go to my website, which is Keis, spelled KENKEIS.com/leadership. So it's a hidden URL, and then you're going to get a free ebook, The Quest for Purpose. And then you can find out through that site some of our other tools, our leadership books, our leadership assessments. Here's the final comment. Take responsibility for your condition. Take responsibility for who you are. And your condition is a result of the work you've done up to this point. If you don't like the direction that you're going in, if you don't like the results you're getting, then take responsibility and change it. And then seek out counsel, support, expertise from around you to go there. Don't freak out. It is what it is. Just accept it, acknowledge where you're at, and then just move forward and do one step at a time. Give yourself the space and acceptance to grow, but do make the commitment to do it.
That's wonderful. And one more time, how can people get in contact with you? Can you give us your website? And
you can go to the KenKeis.com for myself, or the company with all the assessments is crgleader.com. All our tools and resources are there. Love to hear from you if you have any kind of curiosity about what we're doing.
Well, thank you so much, Ken, for taking the time to be on our show.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you for having me on your show. You're awesome.
Thank you. Our special guest was Dr. Ken Keis, President and CEO of Consulting Resource Group International, Inc. And with that, thank you for tuning in and listening to the Leadership with Biana Kovic show. If you like the show, please follow me on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram. You can also listen to the past episodes by going to the Leadership with Biana Kovic YouTube channel. Until next time, have a great night.